That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Baby Ruby, the directorial debut of Bess Wohl, which premiered at the 2022 Toronto International Film Festival. It's being released courtesy of Magnet Releasing. The list I was going off of had it being released February 10th, but I've seen a couple other sources saying it was February 3rd. So if you want to see this, check your local theater listings.
The director's name is Bess?
Bess Wohl, who is an actor and also a noted playwright, and this is her directorial debut.
Bess, I thought your movie was excellent.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
I really, really enjoyed it. The story's kind of basic. It's about this woman named Josephine. Because I'm about to tell it. Uh-huh. This woman named Josephine, who is like a blogger, like a popular blogger.
Played by Noémie Merlant.
So much so that she has an assistant and lives in this beautiful cabin in the woods. But she's pregnant. That's when we meet her. She has her baby, and then things go downhill. So I would call this like a psycho horror film because Josephine starts she thinks her baby is against her.
Punishing her. And
we can go through many scenes that reflect that, but everything culminates with her husband, played by Kit Harington, and Kit's mother, played by
Jayne Atkinson.
They basically have an intervention and say we're committing you to a mental facility because you have lost it. So Josephine goes and she gets treatment, therapy, medication. And then when they think she's well enough, Josephine goes back home. And that first night does not go well. And we see something take her baby. But ultimately, it's really Josephine took her baby in the middle of the night, so no one knows she did it. She runs off into the woods. Someone runs off into the woods with her baby. But then we realize that it's really her, and she's seeing herself and talking to herself. And she sort of calms herself down into realizing everything's going to be okay. The end. So I took this as a movie about, I don't know about having a baby, but it seems kind of postpartum depression, but really maybe this woman, maybe schizophrenia was going to happen to her and having the babies made that happen sooner. I don't know. But really it's about this woman's mental health and its decline as a result of, or stimulated by the baby. But I think what summed it up the most is the mother-in-law at one point shares a story with Josephine saying that, when I had my baby, your husband, it was really hard for me. He wouldn't stop crying. I just felt like I was going to go crazy. I would pray that someone would come and take this baby away from me. And one night I grabbed the knife and I was really thinking about killing him. But obviously I didn't. And then Josephine gets very upset, don't tell me this story. And she goes, and the mother-in-law says, this is the problem. Women cannot talk about their feelings
how they really feel.
And that's when I thought, oh, that's what this movie is about. The worst case scenario that a mother could feel about their kid, but it doesn't mean that people don't feel this way.
Well, and also not being able to articulate it.
And not being able to talk about it is the real horror, right?
But it's it's clear there's something wrong, but she doesn't even have her own tools to really rightly explain without being, she's afraid of being called, she knows she has an awareness of being called crazy or insane because she'll tell, what's his name, Spencer, certain things that she won't tell the doctor, played by Birney, for instance. But she can't even rightly speak to Kit Harington either.
We know something's wrong immediately because before Josephine even has the baby, she's at this cute, probably overpriced little baby store in the little town they're in. And she sees this woman approaches her and starts talking to her. And then that woman is pushing a baby stroller. A
perambulator.
And Josephine goes to touch it and the woman slaps her hand. Don't do that, my baby's sleeping. And so it's oh.
Doesn't she say, don't you know, you don't bother a baby while it's sleeping or something?
So then that's an entirely different storyline where in this cute little town that they live in, there are all these women who have babies. And they all recognize Josephine as this famous blogger. And they all have babies and they all look really put together and they're all super chic and their babies never cry. But we never see the babies. And at one point, Josephine believes that none of these women actually have babies and they're all just fooling her, which is, as I interpreted, all in her head.
Yeah, she starts to have like increasingly agitated hallucinations. Like she even would think she sees Jane Atkinson breastfeeding her baby.
She thinks that lady she met at one point she sees the woman she met at the baby store like throw her baby at the car. The visuals in here are super impressive. There's one sequence where we get a lot of repetitive imagery of Josephine picking up and putting down the baby. We see like multiple Josephines walking around the yard like coddling the baby or whatever the word is.
Who in her mind never stops crying.
Yeah, at one point the baby like bites Josephine's breast as she's breastfeeding the baby, and we find out the baby has like teeth kind of a little earlier than she would expect. I think the character of the doctor is really important because it's this man, and I think he represents sort of like the dismissive component of like what women go through when they have babies.
Yeah, like kids are work, kids are difficult.
Because he's just telling her these things like, well, that's normal, and it's like, how you know?
But also, and she's not sleeping, and all of those things really compound an already delicate situation.
There's a moment where there's a really creepy moment when Josephine is dealing with the baby, and it's nighttime, as far as we see. And then someone's banging at the door, and Josephine's like, who would be knocking at my door in the middle of the night? And when she goes downstairs and opens the door, we realize that it's the middle of the day.
Yeah, it's like late morning even.
And there are some construction workers there and her assistants there like, did you forget? And also, why haven't you submitted a picture of your baby to the blog? It's been a month. Mm-hmm. And that's when we realize like, wow, this lady has been in a daze for like the entire month.
When you walk inside, you see what disarray the house is in. It's like, oh god.
I thought it was funny that Kit Harington, her husband, plays like he says he's like an artisanal butcher. I thought that was funny.
And we do see him at work as well, which is interesting. I do like the scene where she's kind of made friendly with this group of moms who might almost all be in her head except for the one, and they all go like running, like kind of fast.
That was
running.
A creepy scene too.
It's creepy because it reminded me of like watching dinosaurs run in Jurassic Park. Because all the it just
or
looks
it made me
like
think of like the Stepford Wives kind of this movie.
Yeah.
Something that I thought made me really frustrated for her character is she's told more than once that you need to trust your instincts. And I just thought, but what
does that mean?
What does that mean? And what if I have a baby and those instincts aren't kicking in? Like, what if I have a baby and not a single cell in my body is telling me to do anything with this baby? I don't feel close to it. I don't feel warm towards it.
Well, reading this classic baby book / manual that isn't really fitting my situation or helping me in any way, and how alienating that must feel.
There's a really good scene because Josephine's character, she blogs about like her very chic Parisian type life, and she's very fashionable, and she's a beautiful lady, and she effortlessly prepares these very complicated dishes. And so I thought something that represented the contrast very well is we see a moment where she's in the bathroom looking at herself in the mirror, and she looks bedraggled, wearing that device to pump her breast, and then she's like playing with her deflated belly and looking at her stretch marks. And I just thought that was very powerful. Like, she's seeing herself in a way that I'm assuming a person might feel like, this is not worth what I got, which is this baby I don't feel connected to.
Right. And then having her husband walk in on her looking like that and commenting. I mean, he tries to make a joke about the apparatus, but it's like, oh, all of this just feels, as I can imagine, like a lot. And I think Noémie Merlant gives a really fantastic lead performance. Did you recognize her?
Who's that?
The lead.
Oh, no.
Oh, you just saw her in Tar.
Who is she in Tar?
Cate Blanchett's assistant.
That was her?
Yeah. She also gives a really good performance in Portrait of a Lady on Fire and many other films. She actually works quite a bit.
I thought she was really good in... obviously, I think this movie is excellent. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she was great in this one. Another really cool scene was there's a moment where we get visuals of Josephine seeing herself like having been murdered, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I thought they looked really artistic.
Yeah, very elaborate death scenes. Well, it's almost like your mind going to any kind of escapist fantasy to get out of here.
There's a moment where she thinks maybe the dog ate the baby. That looked crazy.
That was gross.
Then there's a moment when we think that maybe she cooked the baby.
Not only that she
and that she's feeding it to her husband.
The husband thinks that.
And I thought that was so well done because as the audience, I'm like, don't tell me this bitch put the baby in the pot. And then the husband is like, did this bitch put our baby in the pot?
Yeah, he looks at her like, where's the baby?
And then she gets mad like, you think I cooked our baby?
She's like, you think I'm crazy.
Yes, I do.
There are other movies that kind of touch on this, but maybe not anything to such a degree from this perspective. There's this horror film with Noomi Rapace called The Monitor that I kept thinking of, Baby Call in its original language, and a Vera Farmiga film called Joshua from 2007, where she also has this child that won't stop crying, and how that really derails absolutely everything.
It derailed me listening to it. Like, there are moments when we see Josephine's shadow like kind of walk away, like separate from her. I thought that was powerful imagery. Okay. Another really good scene is the moms invite Josephine to have like mommy drinks. Mm-hmm. And one night Josephine gets mad because she just can't take the baby anymore. So she gets all dolled up and goes out. And she has a night of drinking and commiserating, which ends with her making out with one of the women. Mm-hmm. Like heavy petting.
Licking,
yeah.
Suckling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then all of a sudden, Josephine wakes up in her car, and then as the audience, we realize that lady never went into the bar. She drove to the bar, fell asleep, and imagined all of that. But then later on in the film, she meets the woman again in a very different way, and the woman's mad at her, like, I've been calling you, mm-hmm. and like, I even brought you like flowers or something to your house. Like, I want to talk to you. Like we're both married women who had this lesbian situation, and you don't want to talk to me. And that's when Josephine realizes, oh my God, that really did happen. Mm-hmm. And normally I don't like stuff like that because it's like, oh, I don't like when I'm being tricked. But in this film, it didn't bother me because I'm also invested in like Josephine's mental health. Like, wow, this lady is not doing well. But I thought that felt very provocative. Like, what are you doing?
Because then immediately she goes into a different rabbit hole of conspiracy theory, thinking that this woman actually doesn't have the child that she claims to have. And it's very much, this woman, this character doesn't know which way is up. And I think it fashions that quite well.
Then there's a moment when Josephine feeds her placenta to her husband and her mother-in-law unknowingly to them by making a bolognese because one of the mommies tells her like that's a good way to like get connected to. That was crazy. But the thing that causes Josephine to get sent to the mental hospital, the
final straw.
Well, what is the final straw?
I don't even remember. There's so much that she's at that woman's house and she calls her husband in a panic saying the baby's in danger.
Right. But so then when they tell her we're going to have you committed, she takes the baby and gets into a car accident. And then that's what solidifies her being kept in the mental hospital.
But I was like, you just need to wait till those men get here, like they're coming to give Blanche Dubois, and tell her then. Don't give her any lead time. Because they tell her that at dinner, and I'm like, she's going to run away with the baby.
Right. And she does. But there's so much about this story I liked. It really did have me on the edge of the couch, like so frustrated for her and anxious. And I kind of felt the same way I felt watching The Babadook.
Sure.
Which I also think is an excellent film.
Yeah.
What would you give this movie?
And also, just kudos again to Jane Atkinson, who is really fantastic.
Well, two people from House of Cards are in this.
Yeah, Reed Birney.
Yes, which, I really like that show, too.
Well, yeah, your little memory, you're like, oh, it's the Secretary of State.
That's how I knew her, the Secretary of State from House of Cards.
And the Vice President, right?
That's right, she does become Vice President.
No, Reed Birney is Vice President, isn't he? I thought he was VP in that.
Yeah, but doesn't...
At first.
The Secretary of State also become VP at one point, right?
Oh, I don't remember.
We need to rewatch House of Cards. But anyway, what would you give this movie?
3.5. I
would give it 4 out of 5. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.